Hello, everybody. Today I'll be going over responsible consumption and production, and this is UN SDG 12. And my name is Karen Congolo, and I'll be walking you through this. So let's get started. Oh, there you go. So here's your description of responsible consumption and production, which scientists have identified ways that people have contributed to planet's um, three crises of climate, biodiversity, and pollution. And all three of these have to do or are linked with responsible consumption and production, as you'll see by its definition. And so, sustainable consumption and production is essentially means to be efficient while also using less. So, with that definition, it correlates to these three crises as the fact that people in previous decades of development weren't efficient with what the products they had contribute to where we are right now with those three crises, as I'll explain later on, but that's how it would link with it. If that makes sense. And like I'm kind of spoke ahead, but it's also about disassociating economic growth and environmental degradation. I think I messed that up. And increasing supply efficiency and encouraging sustainable ways of life. And that is to counter what has previously been done in the past with civilizations or places around the world um, building unsustainably. So that's what this goal is also trying to do, and that's a description of it, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. So here's some background. So each year, 1/3 of all food produced eventually ends up rotting in bins and retailers or spoils as a result of inadequate transportation or harvesting methods. And along with that, the food sector accounts for around 30% of the world's total energy consumption. It accounts for 22% of total greenhouse gas emissions. So that's one big thing about it. And if people replace their current light bulbs with energy efficient light bulbs, the world would save $120 billion annually, which is a pretty hefty sum, if I would say so myself. And also, the share of renewable energy in the final energy consumption has reached 17.5%, and that was as of 2015, so it might be greater. Well, I assume it might be greater now, which kind of depends. You never know. And should the world's population reach 9.6 billion by 2050, which would apparently be the equivalent of 3 planets, or I'm sorry, the equivalent of 3 planets we needed to provide natural resources to sustain current living conditions. Yeah, so that's some background about it. And here's some additional background. This chart right here from the UN. Some fun facts. As you can see, yeah, so not great stuff, I would say. So yeah, and why this is important. So, like I was talking about before, economic and social progress, especially in the last century, was very damaging to the environment, as there's degradation. And although there's progress for us as people, it didn't really help the environment too much. So it's kind of a problem right now, and it could be a problem for our future development if some steps aren't taken to somewhat relieve the stress on the environment and consume responsibly. In the pandemic, offered countries around the world an opportunity to assess what they can do to break the cycle. So, and from that, a successful shift will result in improvements in resource efficiency. So, they places can be more efficient, see how they're using resources with this pandemic, and if they can do that, there might be some positive outcomes of responsible consumption and production moving forward, and it can help their country and countries around the world just in general. I guess the world in general. So all the countries, or I think that's logic that makes sense. So what needs to change? Global material footprint is the indicator of how much pressure is put on the earth. So that's measured, I think, can't not remember exactly, but there is actually a metric for that, so that needs to decrease. And like I was talking about the metric, so it increased 17.4% to 85.9 billion metric tons, 2017, and that's was compared 2010. So it can be greater now, or it can be less since pandemic and whatnot, but it's probably improved. I haven't seen any figures about the current one, but that was as of 4 years ago. So additionally, reducing food loss and waste can assist environmental sustainability and lower management costs, increasing the efficiency of food systems. So reducing food loss, because that's a big problem, and a lot of food get lost, and like I said, it's the large contributor to greenhouse gases would be very good. And there's also a metric for this. I think there's an index for this too. So that's how this is tracked as well. And as of now, we lose 13.8% of food after harvesting and during transport and storage, totaling over 400 billion each year, which is quite the amount, if I say so myself. And yeah, countries, people, any businesses or any individual polluting water, so that's not too good either. That needs to change as well. Now, what's already been done? So there have been some unilateral agreements to share information between countries in the EU, and also agreements and the implementation of the 10-year framework for programs of sustainable consumption and production patterns. So essentially, ways to try to sustainably consume and produce, they're agreeing to that. It kind of says in the name, but just some great clarification that helps. And like I was talking about, these agreements in 2020, 136 policies and implementation activities were reported, bringing the number to over 700. This is a good amount. I guess more can be done though. And also fossil fuel subsidies decreased as a result of the pandemic. And this is different from how it was going prior to that. So I guess that's a good thing for this. Then, like I was talking about before, pandemic really caused this decline in fuel subsidies. So we'll see if it continues or it reverts back to how it was, but hopefully it's the start of a trend and it continues in this pattern. So future directions. One of the future directions are the targets to by 2030 achieve management and efficient use of natural resources. Now this isn't very specific, but it's a goal that they have, and the way they measure this is by looking at material footprint per capita and material footprint per GDP. So that's a metric they use to look at this, and also domestic material consumption, domestic material consumption per capita, and domestic material consumption per GDP is another metric they use. So though if countries decrease those numbers, they're going in the right direction. And this one's kind of self-explanatory. I have the per capita global food waste and retail consumer levels, which is food losses, and that's important, as I've been talking about how a lot of food gets lost, and that's not good for anybody involved. And 2030, substantially reduce waste in generation through prevention, reduction, recycling, reuse. Yeah, again, substantially. It's not extremely specific range or goal they have, but this will be measured by natural recycling rates in tons of material recycled. So decrease that, and they're going in the right direction. And lastly, 2030, ensure that people have relevant information about awareness, which would essentially mean they will implement this curriculum and teach the teachers and students and just let the public know about it. So that's always good. Now what's Missouri doing? Well, fortunately, there's not like anything specific they're doing about responsible consumption production generally, but they do have some groups that recycle, like Mower Reuse, which is a state agency for state like state workers. So like office chairs, paper clips, 3 binders, those get recycled. They're based in Jefferson City, Missouri, because they're state employees. So that's the group in their web-based application. So they just recycle to that group. And then there's Missouri Recycling Association, which is a big recycling group in Missouri, and they have these set of goals right in here that they strive to do. So those are two things I found, and that's all I have for today. Thank you for listening to me. Have a nice day.